Tag it in, fellow gaming unks, because Halo is dead. It has been dead. And it's about time you accept that, because yes, Halo Campaign Evolved has failed to recapture the nostalgia, the memories, the fun of the original fans, but not only that, it has also failed to bring in an entirely new generation to take up the mantle. You can look at this not just seen by the user reviews, but also that it hasn't even sold enough copies to be considered a modest commercial success. Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and we're going to break down everything that went completely wrong with Halo Campaign Evolved. Halo Campaign Evolved scores 81, lowest in 25 years as of 2026, this coming from Shattered, and this article is an absolute doozy. Critics and players were already telling two very different stories about the game, one generally favorable, the other openly hostile towards its always online requirement. 3 days after launch, with the review count still climbing and Steam's user rating stuck on mixed, the numbers are firm enough to draw conclusions about what went right, what didn't, and what it means for Microsoft's broader Xbox strategy. As of this writing, Metacritic lists Halo Campaign Evolved at 81 out of 100, labeled generally favorable based on 46 critic reviews. OpenCritic's top critic average sits at 83, with 90% of its 87 track reviews recommending the game. What the aggregate doesn't show, at least not up front, a sharp divergence between what critics think and what the people actually playing the game think. The gap becomes the second half of the story. Well, would you look at that? A game journalism outlet willing to actually say, the fans are saying something, what are they saying, and is it worthy of noting in a story? I must say, that alone actually makes this almost an entertaining and worthwhile piece of games journalism. Per-platform scores diverge sharply. The 81 aggregate hides a wide platform spread. Metacritic's per-platform breakdown shows Xbox Series X and S at 84, PlayStation 5, the first mainline Halo release ever on Sony hardware, at 81, and PC trailing at 77. A 7-point gap between the best and worst reviewed versions of the same game is unusually wide for a title built on one shared codebase. And I'm sure you're familiar with this story, but what you're about to see here is a PC port that did not get the same love, care, and attention as its console counterparts, despite something very interesting about PC gaming. Why PC is dragging the average down? Reviewers testing the PC version have reportedly flagged input lag on mouse and keyboard, crashes during longer play sessions, texture shimmering during fast camera movement, and an inability to fully disable upscaling even on hardware powerful enough not to need it. None of these read as fundamentally broken campaign. They're port quality issues suggesting less polish time went into the PC build specifically, a detail that lines up with development process reporting covered later in this piece. But here's the interesting thing about that, because PC gaming is not the niche it used to be. In fact, there's a time when you were just the upper echelon of gamer, albeit with a whole lot less choice if you were a PC gamer. That was in like 2006. We're in 2026. PC gamers outnumber console gamers, and it's not even close. Just look at this article from 2025. PC gaming gained more players than consoles in 2024. In the 2025 PC and console gaming report from Newzoo, global data indicates that more players started playing games on PC than they did on console. According to the report, PC player numbers rose 3.9% year over year from 873.5 million to 907.5 million just in 2024. Console player growth, on the other hand, while still up, only grew 2.3% from 615.6 million to 629.5 million. Looking to the future, Newzoo projects that player growth will steadily continue to rise for 2025 and through 2027. It projects that PC numbers will increase to around 930.1 million this year, while console players will jump to 653.1 million. By the end of 2027, Newzoo suggests that PC and console player numbers will be around 971.7 million and 698 million respectively. That is a huge disparity, by the way. We're talking about more than 200 million players on PC over both consoles combined. Yeah, needless to say, if I was the one in charge and I was making decisions, I would think maybe the best performing version of our game should be the one that has the most customers playing on it. We're rolling with outdated numbers here. These are from 2025. The numbers in the gap has only widened since then. We're looking at, obviously, by 2027, if PC wasn't already dominant, it is, by the way, overwhelmingly dominating gaming going forward. Yet we're still stuck in this issue, not just with Halo, by the way, but with PC ports of games oftentimes being the ports with the most bugs and issues, which leads to a development issue out the gate. But getting back to Halo overall, 25 years of Halo scores and how the remake compares, Halo Combat Evolved launched in November of 2001 to a 97 on Metacritic. 25 years and 8 mainline campaign entries later, Campaign Evolved is an 81. It's the lowest score any of them has ever posted, a 16-point drop from the original that it's remaking. And mind you, it's not as good as the original, and I don't think any classic fan would argue with that. I mean, first of all, yes, it is mostly a faithful remake in terms of the level design hasn't changed, but you've changed a bunch of other mechanics such as sprinting, which kind of conflict with the level design. I'm not saying they should have reimagined the game. As you guys know from my previous videos, I'm vehemently against games being called remakes when getting complete and utter reimaginings. But you also can't sit there and tell me that it makes any sort of sense to keep the layout and level design the exact same while adding a bunch of modern mechanics that nobody asked for. That leads into what the critics are actually saying. Halo Campaign Evolved is faithful yet modernized remake of Halo Combat Evolved's campaign. The studio's own framing and reviewers largely agree with the faithful half of it. The critical consensus running through most of the roundup leans towards competent but overly cautious. A remake that respects the original's combat and level design rather than reimagining it. Scores across the outlets covering the release range wildly. VGC and Daily Star both landed a perfect 10 out of 10. Game Informer gave it an 8.5. IGN and Insider Gaming both settled on a 7 out of 10, and DualShockers came in the lowest among major outlets at 6.5 out of 10, a spread that itself tells you critics don't agree on how much faithful should count for in 2026. Well, thankfully enough, we're not looking for what critics count as faithful. I'm looking for what gamers count as faithful. Gamers that play things like the Spyro Reunited trilogy because they grew up with the original Spyro games, the Resident Evil 1 remake, and that's the only Resident Evil remake, compared to the 1996 game, the Tomb Raider remastered games which came out recently. I get it, those are remasters, not remakes, but you understand the point. We've got the Crash Insane trilogy. Those are some pretty ground-up built remakes. The point is, yes, the obvious intent was for a remake, and if you're gonna remake a classic game, it's clearly for the fans that played the original version of said classic game. I don't even know if any of these game journalists played the classic Halo. Were they old enough? Were they around? Were they even gamers back then? So yes, I would focus on what the fans have to say, not what the critics have to say. The always online controversy overshadowing a single-player campaign. Halo Campaign Evolved requires a mandatory Microsoft account login even to play its offline single-player only campaign. During early access, server overload produced login failed, cannot play the single-player game as servers are overloaded, errors for some players trying to start a campaign with no online component at all. Halo Studios said the specific login issue has since been resolved, but the underlying design choice requiring a live login for content that needs no server at all hasn't gone anywhere, and it shows up in nearly every negative review and user complaint. As it should. Look, I was massively looking forward to Marvel Tokon Battle. It actually was amongst the highest, most anticipated game of the year for me. And then, lo and behold, even though I'm playing on Steam, I gotta have a PSN login. I don't even have a PSN account because I'm not a filthy Sony pony. I have to create a PSN account to play this game. Sorry, no thank you. Why should I, as Steam player, need to do that? The fact that these players out here, be it on Steam, Xbox, whatever it may be, PlayStation, that they think that they need to create an Xbox account, a Microsoft account, is foolhardy. If you're releasing the game on a platform, then the only login you should need is for that platform, especially considering so much of the game is, in fact, offline. Same with Marvel Tokon. You will not be able to play that game on Steam, even the offline modes, without signing in to a PSN account. That is scummy corporatist behavior that we as gamers should not be allowing to continue. Critics say 81, players say 5, the widening score gap. Metacritic's user score sits at a 5.0 out of 10, labeled mixed or average based on 94 user rankings, a stark contrast to the 81 critic aggregate built on more than 3 times as many reviews. That's not a small gap. It's kind of a critic-player split that usually points to a structural complaint rather than disagreement over level design. The always-online requirement is the leading suspect. Critics reviewing on provided codes over a fixed window are less likely to hit server capacity problems than a mass of players logging in simultaneously at 8 a.m. PDT on launch day, and a mandatory login for offline content is exactly the kind of decision that reads as a paragraph in a review, but as a blocking error message for paying customers trying to start a single-player game. User review scores skew far more sensitive to exactly that kind of friction than critic scores do, as they should. These are the sorts of things that critics should actually be talking about. And again, this has actually been a pretty fair piece of game journalism as somebody who's made my living on YouTube bitching and moaning about game journalism. So far, we're seeing mostly what seems to be fair, but this is also the sort of things that critics would need to tackle. And I get that, well, they're not going to know that this is an issue until launch day, But that doesn't make the fan complaints and the fan criticisms any less valid, and you will see many a critic saying, oh, these gamers are just throwing a fit, they're entitled, they're whiny, when in all reality, no, we have legitimate grievances, and there's a lot in this game to have grievances with, especially if you are a classic Halo fan, or let's say you're a PlayStation fan who doesn't have a Microsoft account, doesn't have an Xbox, and just wants to experience Halo for the first time. Now, mind you, if you are a PlayStation fan and you want to experience Halo for the first time, this is on you for experiencing it this way. How about you buy a fucking Xbox or get a Steam account and, play it like an adult the way it was meant to be played with the classics, but that's just my 2 cents. Steam's mixed rating and a historically weak launch. Halo Campaign Evolved currently holds a mixed rating on Steam with 66% of its 5,417 English language reviews and 6,800 a total across all languages marked positive. 2/3 positive number is consistent with always online friction showing up in written reviews, many of which cite the login requirement directly rather than the campaign itself. The concurrent player numbers tell a similar story. Campaign Evolved peaked at 25,376 concurrent Steam players, roughly 10 hours after launch. The weakest Steam debut in the franchise's history, and only the 17th biggest launch among Xbox Game Studio titles on the platform. For context, Halo Infinite's lifetime peak of 272,586 concurrent players, and Halo the Master Chief Collection at 161,024 both dwarf that figure. We need to understand this for a moment. Obviously, there is additional context to be given, but we are talking about Halo, not just any Halo, the first Halo, the game that put Master Chief on the map, that made him part of the zeitgeist when it comes to gaming iconography. If you make a Mount Rushmore of video game characters, Mario, Sonic, probably Link, and then I'd wager Master Chief. Look, maybe you could swap out Link for Lara Croft, but the point is, Master Chief's on that Mount Rushmore right next to Mario and Sonic. The fact that you couldn't even recapture this game in a way that made people yearn and long and want to play it, that you had to get the 17th highest Xbox Studio game on Steam. 17th highest is a nothing burger. No one, first of all, we've all been on YouTube. You don't do top 17 lists, they do top 10 lists. Nobody cares about anything outside the top 10. This is Halo we're talking about. This should be a top 5, if not top 3. Dare I say, should be a number 1, but the days of Halo being number 1 in anything are long since gone. It should be noted that Infinite's numbers inflated by its free-to-play multiplayer, which Campaign Evolved doesn't have. Community sentiment in early Steam discussion threads has actively steered prospective buyers towards the already owned Master Chief Collection, which includes a 2014 remaster of the original Combat Evolved and is already on Game Pass, or even the original 2003 PC port, rather than paying full price for a new remake. And that's just what this one outlet has to say. But wait, there's more! From Gaming Bolt. What really happened with Halo Campaign Evolved? The mood around the once universally beloved first-person shooter is a little odd. Despite generally positive reviews from critics, an 81 Metascore on PS5 based on 50 reviews and 84 Xbox based on 34, this is far from a homecoming, especially for a franchise as illustrious as Halo, or at least previously. On Steam, Advanced Access hit nearly 20,000 peak concurrent players, not too shabby at all, but how did that translate at launch? A peak of almost 26,000 concerns. The Halo Master Chief Collection performed far better when it debuted December 2019 on the platform, peaking at slightly over 161,000 concurrent players, and seeing Campaign Evolved debut to about 1/6 of that is perplexing, especially since it's supposed to be the first title following 343's big rebrand and shift to Unreal Engine 5. Now look, we can talk about the shift to Unreal Engine 5 and whether that's a good thing. I've made my peace with the fact that I think that is a horrible thing, because so far everything I've seen has shown it loses any and all sense of art direction that made the original so classic. But beyond that, this is where the entire discussion gets interesting, because we're going from user reviews and critic reviews to actual sales numbers. And it's sad. Of course, if it simply underperformed on Steam, which we'll come back to, that would probably be the end of it. What makes this all the stranger is how comparatively performed on consoles. According to Circana's Matt Piscatella, Campaign Evolved ranked 4th in daily active users on Xbox in the United States. About 8% of the total console share launched the game. You're trying to tell me that Halo Master Chief, the mascot of Xbox itself, ranked that low on opening day? 8% of your player base? Something has got the legacy of Halo is this isn't just the fault of one game, by the way. This is what happens after years upon years of you destroying the legacy of the franchise you created, changing and altering the lore and the story and the characters and the gameplay, putting out games nobody cares about, putting out side games that nobody cares about, letting the system play dormant for months, changing the type of game it is. Oh, you mean you want to give us a free-to-play what is effectively Battle Royale, Halo Infinite? What Halo fan was asking for fucking that? No one. How can you blame Campaign Evolved? And this isn't even me defending Campaign Evolved. I'm certainly not. But you can't even blame Campaign Evolved for these bad numbers on their own, because this is the definition of what happens when you tarnish your own legacy. Game Pass is probably the big equalizer here. With the average Xbox player spending over 2 hours in-game, you would think that PS5 would be far weaker. And you're correct. About 1% of active players booted the game up, even lower than the 2% of Steam players. Now, it's funny when they say 1% of PS5 players and 2% of Steam players, because, again, what did we mention earlier? There's way more Steam players. Way more Steam players. So if only 2% of the Steam fan base booted this game up, that's actually not inherently a bad number, because Steam has so many more players and so many more games. Sony and PlayStation don't have that luxury. If they only had 1% of their player base pick it up, this game is dead on arrival. Now, to be fair, I don't see a whole lot of Sony ponies clamoring to play Halo because they don't have any nostalgia for it. This has always been a Microsoft product. It's always been an Xbox product. I just don't think that there's any reason for them to buy a remake of a game they never played growing up that they're not nostalgia for because, well, it was an exclusive to a console that they didn't jive with. Obviously, there's going to be some crossover, but by and large, Master Chief and Halo never really fit the Sony marketplace to begin with. This was going to be a tough sell no matter what, just due to the lack of them engaging with the culture that Microsoft had from the glory days. And we also have to round out the discussion on the numbers with this article from Vice. Call of Duty Black Ops ports outsold Halo on PS5 by nearly 11 million copies. The Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and 2 ports repeatedly outsold Halo Campaign Evolved on PS5 by nearly 11 million copies. If the latest Alnia Analytics estimates are accurate, the lower budget Call of Duty ports collectively outsold Microsoft's 2026 Halo remake by almost 32-1. That is embarrassing. We're talking about, look, I get it. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and 2 are beloved games. I don't know why, because they are the same repackaged and repurposed slop that, frankly, Call of Duty has always been, but whatever. There's a lot of people in their late 20s and early 30s who have a lot of nostalgia for these games, and they're willing to piss away their hard-earned money just to get that nostalgia boner going. Not too terribly dissimilar from Halo 1, but let's be real, Halo 1 is the far better and far more influential game when it comes to the history of gaming, which just goes to show how badly Microsoft truly screwed the pooch on this one. The Alnia Analytics marketing head wrote, "Beyond the Call of Duty ports doing gangbusters, the thing that stands out is Halo's notably slow start on PlayStation, which ironically stings even more next to the success of two effort-light Call of Duty ports. Halo sold, and get this, 351,000 copies on PS5 in July and 452,000 on PlayStation to date. That's almost 28 million. According to Alnia Analytics, here's how the PS5 sales of the two Call of Duty ports compare to Halo Combat Evolved. And as you can see, 8.2 million just for Black Ops 2, 3 million for Call of Duty Black Ops, and 452,000 to date. Note, to date would be August 5th at the time of the recording of this video. Man, that is truly sad. You know, there's always a lot of individuals that say things like, oh, the Steam numbers don't matter. Why are really the concurrent players? Oh, so-and-so franchise has always traditionally done better on console. Yeah, well, at the end of the day, Steam, PC in general, they are bigger than consoles. We're looking at over 200 million more daily active users on PC than on all consoles combined, actually. And even on the console itself, when so many people will say this has traditionally been a console game, despite the fact that Halo has always been a PC game, but that's neither here nor there, will say this sold less than 500,000 copies. Less than 500,000 on consoles. I understand that not everybody likes remakes. Hell, I don't like remakes. I'm quite unenthused with remake culture as of late. But even remasters like Oblivion, and that is a remaster, not a remake, sold over 1 million in the first week. Are you going to look me straight in the eyes, dead in the face, and tell me that Oblivion is more iconic than Halo? Obviously the fuck not. In fact, when you look at July's top PlayStation games being sold by copies, Black Ops 1 and 2 took the crown, Black Flag Resynced underneath it. In fact, Grand Theft Auto 5 and Minecraft, two old as shit games, outsold Halo, and outsold Halo by a lot. As for why Halo Campaign Evolved sold so poorly on the PS5, Reese Elliott believes the remake's $60 price tag hurt its launch. $60 was way too much for this one. A proven, beloved, old game dropped at the right moment and, just as importantly, at the right price can out-earn almost anything new and buy a bit of breathing room in the slate. The Alnia Analytics marketing lead was then further critical of Halo Campaign Evolved's $60 pricing strategy. COD got it, Halo didn't. $60 for what's essentially a graphical touch-up of a 2001 game was always going to be a rough sell, and players clearly weren't having it. Now, I am actually going to push back on this, because I don't think it's fair. Again, don't think this is me defending this game, because I'm certainly not, but to call it a graphical touch-up is insanely underselling it. Anytime you rebuild a game from the ground up, that's not a graphical touch-up, that is an entirely new game. You would not call the Spyro Reignited trilogy a graphical touch-up. You wouldn't call Resident Evil 2 Remake a graphical touch-up, despite the fact that Resident Evil 2 Remake is a reimagining, not a remake. That's neither here nor there. The point is, we're talking about brand new games built from the ground up, and unlike with Call of Duty, this had new content. Yeah, needless to say, I do think they're very much underselling it here. Whether $60 is fair or not can be debated, but Oblivion Remastered, back to that, was really just a graphical touch-up, and that was sold for $50. And again, sold 1 million copies in a week. I don't think it's the price. I think that it's people are disenchanted with Halo. People are very upset with the lore, the history, the state of this franchise's being, and how they've been spit on by Microsoft and by 343 for the last God knows how many years. The article from Vice also mentions about Halo Campaign requiring an Xbox account to play on PS5 was another reason they skipped it. That being said, they also believe that the price being the biggest hurdle. And between you and me, I don't really think that's true. I actually do believe that having to create an entirely new online account for a system and console and company you don't have and don't have any investment in the ecosystem of is actually a bigger point of contention than paying, frankly, what is less than the standard price of gaming nowadays. Again, for better or for worse. At the end of the day, I just find this situation to be funny because I am a longtime Halo fan. I've been playing Halo since the very first game, and I do believe that Halo peaked with, 3 Reach? I mean, the best two are Reach and 2. Let's be real. Halo 2 and Halo Reach, those are the end-all, be-all Halo games. As far as which one's better, my opinion's going to change day to day. But the point is, Halo as a franchise has been a shadow of its former self for so long, and even if this game were good, let's pretend for a moment that it were, you can only put out subpar products for so long before even your good entries are hurt, and this one isn't even a good entry. It's a nice attempt, but at the end of the day, it is a nostalgia cash grab with no real soul behind it. A complete change to direction, art style, change to the story that nobody asked for or cared about. The prelude missions that I guess, sure, that's fine, but was anyone buying it for that? Even if they added new levels of Spyro Reignited Trilogy, I wouldn't have bought them for those levels. I'd be buying it because, well, I want to recapture the original Spyro the Dragon on modern hardware. So I don't think that was much of a selling point, more just a cherry on top. At the end of the day, I'm actively rooting for the downfall of Halo because sometimes things need to end. Things need to die, and Halo has far outstayed its welcome. You're only as good as your last hit, and Halo hasn't had a hit in damn near 20 years. But these are just my opinions. Let me know yours in the comments down below, or let me know on X, where you can find me at Bolt the Word, and please just subscribe. I am a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news every day, not always about the gaming industry, but anime, movies, music, Magic the Gathering, you name it. Check us out on Instagram at wordsparadise_Leon, and become a member for $4.99 a month. You can join the Discord, choose the articles you go over on a day-to-day basis, choose the videos we react to on the daily live streams, of course, get involved with over 200 other vital idols. We are a bright, beautiful, glowing, vibrant community that I cannot wait to grow even further, because we do care about diversity. Only one kind of diversity. Diversity of thought that's interesting to you. Join the Discord, hit subscribe. Until next time, it's all here in the Nerdosphere. This has been Words of Paradise.